Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Trust the weekend was terrific. Sub-Saharan Africa, this is how you assure people on the status of the economy. It's a very short video, 12 seconds. Click on it and watch it. In 2019, according to Saiton, Sub-Saharan Africa is expected to register economic growth of 3.4%, higher than the 2.7% expected in 2018. And 2.6% recorded in 2017. Of course, if you strip out Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, we're growing with a 5% handle. But I think Nigeria is going to struggle for now. It's sort of trundling along at the bottom. We've got the election in front of us as well as we have in South Africa. Once again, one time too many, wielders of power deceptively continue to instrumentalize the person of Ali Bongo Ondimba, a patient devoid of many of his physical and mental faculties. That's the Mail on Guardian quoting the coup plotters in Gabon. And then delving into the reasons that explain the failure of the coup. And the main reason must be that the French were not keen on it, I suppose. But it still speaks to my point that I made to Sami Zidane on Al Jazeera. What we're watching across this continent, whether it's Gabon, Sudan, or the DR Congo, is a kind of tipping point moment. Who really won in the Congo? The whistleblower supply data indicates that Fayulu received 59.42% of the vote. The Economist is reporting on the same thing. We've waited years for this moment. Two young girls behind her gyrated their hips and sang, "Bayo Kabila" again and again. These results have nothing to do with the truth of the ballot box, Mr. Fayulu said. It's an electoral coup. It's incomprehensible. Critics say that Mr. Kabila was desperate to keep Mr. Fayulu away from the throne because he was backed by two of the president's biggest adversaries, Moise Katumbi and John-Pierre Bemba, who were both barred from standing. Fayulu appeared to represent real change. He'd campaigned on a promise to reduce corruption and enforce the rule of law, an obvious threat to those who have looted this giant, mineral-rich country for decades. The Kabila camp was never afraid of feelings. They consider him a weak personality. Tshisekedi, for his part, said, "I paid tribute to President Kabila, and today we should no longer see him as an adversary, but rather a partner in democratic change." The election surely will be contested. And I quoted Stalin in my article before we knew what this result was, that it's not the people who count that vote, it's the people who count the votes that matter. SADC SADC says Congo should recount and provide the necessary reassurance to both winners and losers, they said. And they're also drawing the attention of Congolese politicians to similar arrangements that were successful in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Kenya that created the necessary stability for durable peace, the statement said. I then came across this in translation. Where do the results of the legislation announced by Seni come from? Local compilation centers? Obviously not. Have a look at this from TV Monde Info. The Kabila regime just worked a miracle, announcing the results of legislative elections without bothering to count the votes. Here's an expose. That's from James North 7. The Economist is writing about Sudan. We are all Darfur. Sudan's genocidal regime is under siege. The seeds of the current crisis were sown in late 2017 when the government announced plans to end wheat subsidies. The aim was to plug a budget deficit forecast to hit almost 5% of GDP this year. When the price of bread doubled a year ago, triggering protests, the government tried to reverse course, reintroduce some of the subsidy, but the economy already struggling following the succession of South Sudan, which took away 75% of Sudan's oil reserves in 2011, had nosedived. It shrank by 2.3% in 2018. Unable to pay its bills, the government has printed money Inflation at around 70% is now the second highest in the world after Venezuela. You stand in line at the bank waiting for cash that will barely buy you anything, says Abuzar Osman, a 28-year-old photographer who was arrested last month. We now spend our lives standing in queues. Bashir's tactic, blaming Darfuri rebels, has had little success. Protesters from the regime's traditional strongholds in Khartoum in the north have chanted, "We're all Darfur," and even though the police have shot and arrested people, demonstrations have shown little sign of abating. If anything, they seem to be getting better organized. The protest movement is now largely led by the Sudanese Professionals Association. Broken alone, Mr. Bashir faces protesters who keep turning to the streets despite tear gas and bullets. The people's rage is infinite, says Brahim Snoopy. We don't know what will happen next. That took me back to the revolutionary contingent. Attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor machine of attack. In other words, a producer of speed. And those are the two forces that are at play at the moment. South African all shares up 1.74% this year. Dollar versus rand 13.9038. Egyptian pound 17.9180. Nigerian stock market is down 5.09% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 0.07% this year. Zimbabwe just doubled gasoline and diesel prices overnight. This puts the price at about $12.5 per gallon versus $3 in the US, a dramatic increase. The only good news is that it should ensure the fuel supply. But the bigger problem is that there are $10 billion of electronic funds trapped in local bank accounts, and less than $400 million in actual cash, which is less than 2 weeks import cover. That is the conundrum. In banking terms, did the Kenya government sign a floating debenture, a claim on any of its assets if it defaults on its loans for the construction of the SGR, instead of a fixed debenture? This is being asked by Bank Kalele in an article, subject of much debate. In 2018, the Kenyan economy grew 6% through Q3 compared to an average of 4.7% through Q3 in 2017. Tourism continued to record double-digit growth, having averaged 15.1% in the first 3 quarters of 2018. Big boost in the number of visitor arrivals. Private sector credit growth improved in 2018, averaging 3.4% in the 10 months to October, compared to 2.3% in a similar period in 2017, but remained below the 5-year average of 12.4%. Kenya shilling appreciated by 1.3% against the dollar last year, largely on the back of improving diaspora remittances, which increased 42.5% through the first 10 months of 2018. Yields on the 10-year Eurobond and 30-year Eurobond closed the year at 8.9% and 9.7%, but we've seen a small rally in African Eurobonds since the beginning of the year. Foreign investors remained net sellers with a net outflow of 288.8 million, a 146.6% increase compared to net outflows of 113.7 million in full year 2017. Nairobi all shares up 1.55% this year, but since the peak in February 2015, the Nairobi all shares down 20.9% and the NSE 20 is down 48.4%. That's from Saiton. NSE is currently trading at a PE ratio of 11.6 and dividend yield of 5.1%. The NSE 20 is down 1.39%. The only large cap NSE gainer during 2018 was Barclays, which gained 14.1%. Barclays trades on a PE of 9.024 and its market cap is just below $600 million. CBA has issued a cash buyout offer for Jamii Bora Bank at 0.4 times price to book. Africa Invest and Catalyst Principal Partners have acquired a 24.2% stake in Prime Bank Kenya at a price to book of 1.